Welcome into the EMAW Online podcast. Quick amendment to start the show before you hear anything that Alec and Gabe or I say. This is nothing serious for us. You don't have to worry about us saying something stupid, but maybe we sound stupid because we talk about obviously the K-State TCU game that's taking place on Thursday. Part of that story is obviously Eddie Lampkin for TCU, who had a very monstrous game against K-State the first time, was dealing with injuries. The second time they played a little bit. After we finished recording, news came out, multiple places have reported it now, that Eddie Lampkin is not with the team in Kansas City and will not be with them for the Big 12 tournament. So just so everybody is aware of that and we don't lead you astray thinking that Eddie Lampkin would be playing. Now, I don't know that any of us said that Eddie Lampkin was going to go off for 35 and have this monstrous impact in the game. But just so you know, Eddie Lampkin, we do know he is not going to be with TCU for the time being. And that means that what we say about TCU that mentions Eddie Lampkin in here, just disregard it. Everything else about the Frogs is still on brand. And here we go. Let's start the podcast. Welcome into the EMAW Online podcast. Mason Voth, Alec Bussey, Gabe Schwartz here with you. Getting ready to preview the Big 12 tournament. Some people call it the best week of the year. I call it that outside of opening day and maybe some other things. I guess I'm going to have a pretty good week in the summer when I have a kid born. But for now, this is the best week of the year. And I know that some people think it's the first and second weekend. Oh, I'm pumped about it. Some people are really excited about the first and second rounds. Those are fun. Those are great. But I could do without some 116 games or whatever. There are going to be some boring ones. Like conference tournament week, there are Power 5 games against Power 5 games going galore. It's a beautiful time. Even yesterday when the ACC is tipping off at 1 o'clock, the ACC sucks, but hey, it's Power 5 basketball. I'm going to watch it. The smaller conferences, they were kind of brutal last night though. Gonzaga and Oral Roberts, they didn't want to play with their food at all. They left no doubt in their games. So real quick, do we want to start with a check of the Big 12 scoreboard from last night? Just so everybody knows, Gonzaga won the West Coast Conference. Can't wait to welcome them in. So that's great. Anybody, any other future members of the Big 12 playing tonight out west? Do we know yet? Yeah, Colorado's got Washington at 2. Utah plays Stanford at 8. Oh, and the Sun Devils at 10:30 tonight. So there you go. There's your Big 12 scoreboard, just getting it out of the way early. Houston gets to mop up the floor with some crappy American Athletic Conference teams Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's all we need to do there. And we can get into the real stuff because we've got the Big 12 tournament going. K-State gets the last game of the day on Thursday. They get a third game with TCU. And I think that I would have rather K-State have ended up in that 2-7 game so they played Oklahoma State or Oklahoma. You'd feel much better about that than anybody in the top 6 of the league. But this is going to be a good matchup and a good measuring stick for K-State because both games against TCU this year, I don't really think you can take a lot away from them. K-State probably played their worst game of the season at TCU in Fort Worth back in January. And then when TCU came to Manhattan, there was no Mike Miles. Eddie Lampkin was coming back from injury. There was a lot of stuff that was banged up. And K-State went on a weird run in the final 3-5 minutes of the game where they ended up winning by 20 points. So we get to see these two teams for what it feels like at their best and just straight up playing against each other now. So I'll start with Alec. What are your expectations for tomorrow's game as we record this on a Wednesday for K-State and TCU in Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to not be excited about this game because I feel like TCU is kind of coming in stumbling when you kind of look at what they've done to only win 2 of your last 5 games. It's really tough, and I think it's 3 of their last 8 or 9 entering the tournament in general. But TCU just had a really unfortunate season with Mike Miles being hurt for a good portion of it, and then obviously Eddie Lampkin, like you said, also being hurt for a good portion of it with both just kind of lingering injuries. This is a TCU team that I'm not particularly high on, I guess you could say. I can see the potential of this team and see why people would buy this team when you look at some of the returning players that they had from last year. We know Mike Miles is really good. We know Eddie Lampkin can be kind of a matchup issue in the Big 12 in particular. But they leave a lot to be desired. I mean, they only shoot 29.5% from 3 this season. That's one of the worst in the country. It's in the 350s nationally. So there's a lot that makes you question how good this TCU team really is. But then there's also areas where they really excel. They're really good defensively, enforcing steals and getting out in transition and getting buckets at the rim via the fast break. So What I'm really looking forward to in this game is which Marquise Noel shows up, because the last time these two teams played in Manhattan, he was much better. He didn't turn it over as much. But if you go back to the time they played in Fort Worth, he was a turnover machine, and he was really bad against West Virginia with his turnovers as well. So after feeling like he maybe solved some of those issues, Gabe, with 2 games where he had 10 assists against Baylor and then 10 more assists in K-State's season finale at home against Oklahoma with just one turnover, you feel like maybe he regressed back to what he was struggling with the loss to West Virginia. So I really think that that's probably the biggest key in this game for K-State is protecting the ball and making sure that TCU isn't able to get easy leak out buckets.
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back and forth as I look into these teams again and kind of refresh myself on how the first 2 matchups went, on how important is Mike Miles, because I've heard Fran Fraschilla, and I think that Fran knows the league as well as anybody, top to bottom. But I've heard him compare Mike Miles to Patrick Mahomes in terms of his importance to this team. And that is, I would say, delusional from a pure value standpoint. And I would say whether it's how you feel about it or whether you just want to go off of what the numbers say, it's delusional, because I know that the sample size is different because Mike Miles was injured throughout this season throughout since the Big 12 SEC Challenge when he hyperextended his knee at Mississippi State. But of the top 9 guys in TCU's rotation, Mike Miles has the worst defensive rating of any of those guys. So I can actually make an argument that Marquise Noel is going to be more comfortable offensively when Mike Miles is on the floor than he would be just against Damian Baugh, Emmanuel Miller, Micah Peavy, or Shahada Wells, all those guards that they've got and all those wings that they've got who are lanky guys who can pose some matchup problems for him. So I don't necessarily think that Mike Miles being back makes this more like the game in Fort Worth. I honestly think if the K-State crowd shows up, if the T-Mobile Center is more lavender than whatever the TCU purple or black is, I think that K-State should be able to handle this game, because TCU is so poor at shooting 3-pointers that the best version of K-State is the team that rebounds and pushes. And TCU provides a lot of opportunities to take long rebounds and push them in transition. And that's what K-State is best at.
Well, I think that's a good point, because look, you guys know this, maybe to an extreme. I don't get the Mike Miles love that some people have. I think he's a very good player. He's probably TCU's best player. I'm not going to throw anybody else out there, but TCU was loved up before the start of the season, and I was supposed to believe. I've seen Mike Miles play, and the numbers are there, but I've always called him a fake good player. He doesn't stand out to me as much as others, and a game against Mike Miles never really concerns me. Now, TCU as a whole, there are some things to worry about. Jamie Dixon is obviously a great basketball coach. He's proven that over his time at Pitt and turning TCU into a legit top 25 team. And he's built a roster that there are a lot of things that can work well together. But Miles shouldn't be the thing that scares you here. We know what the recipe is that TCU was able to torch K-State with the first time. Miles was kind of a non-factor in that game in Fort Worth back at the start of the year. He struggled from the field, and maybe his points still added up to a decent number, but he shot pretty poorly. It was really because Eddie Lampkin and some other guys for TCU were able to get into the paint and finish, and then also K-State gave the ball away a ton to where TCU could get out and run the floor and have an advantage there. So I'm not overly concerned about it, and I think to what Gabe says about K-State's going to have a massive support group there. The fans that show up, that's probably going to be the most fans K-State has in Kansas City in a long time. You would think that going back to 2019, but I think the way that the fan base is active this year, with Bruce, everything was just still so lukewarm and you were dipping your toes in the water. Everybody's fully bought back in right now. And so I think this is going to be one of the stronger crowds in Kansas City since 2013 2010, like the Frank days. And TCU is a team that K-State's matched up with a couple of times in the Big 12 tournament. I was going to go back and try and find it real quick because I don't know that TCU has ever beat K-State in the Big 12 tournament. Maybe there was one time, like one of the 2 years where Bruce was down the first time around. Like, this isn't necessarily a team that is going to be able to do much there. I think the crowning achievement for TCU in the 10 years they've been in the league is beating KU in the quarterfinals. In what year would that have been? I'm trying to think if that was like 2018, I think.
I think it was 2017 because I think it was the Frank Mason National Player of the Year season.
Yeah. So, like, they don't necessarily scare me in regards to that. And, like, this is – I mean, this sounds kind of like a broken record because I think we say this a lot. But how many teams in this league that if K-State goes out there and they just minimize the turnovers even a little bit and they have the crowd on their side, like, how many teams can actually beat them when that's going on? Because really, I think that number shrinks down to probably only KU and Texas at this point. And even then, like, we know K-State can handle Texas. Texas just has the talent to be capable of doing that. Same for KU. And maybe Baylor does, but like we've seen 2 games against Baylor this year. And even though they've been tight at various points, K-State's felt like they've had control for almost the entire 80 minutes that those teams have been against each other. So as long as like everybody shows up fan-wise for K-State tomorrow and K-State's, locked in enough, they should be able to handle business against TCU.
I think it's going to be a fascinating. This will be my first Big 12 tournament experience as well, so I'm excited for it from that perspective. I just think it's a fascinating matchup for Kansas State, and I think you're really kind of seeing the value of what winning at West Virginia would have done for you in the Big 12 tournament, having to play TCU in the quarterfinals instead of having to play the winner of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, like Texas is now fortunate enough to do. Because I think Texas is probably going to feel pretty good about their opportunities to get to the semifinals on Friday because, even though Oklahoma State's desperate and even though Oklahoma State probably needs 1 or 2 wins to kind of feel like they're in the tournament again, they really just have not played well since they've lost some key contributors with injury. And, we know the struggles that they've had. And that's really tough for Oklahoma State to kind of lose some key contributors at this point in the season. So I think Texas probably feels pretty good about their chances to get to Friday. But I don't think Texas would feel as good about their chances to get to Friday if they were playing TCU on Thursday night. And that's what's tough for Kansas State is I know, Mason, you kind of felt like that the game against West Virginia didn't necessarily matter too much for Kansas State. And I guess it depends on how much value you're placing on the Big 12 tournament. I know different people put different value on the conference tournament. I was texting with a friend yesterday who is a big Indiana fan, and he was telling, and I was like, did you know that Indiana's never won the Big Ten tournament? And he was like, no, I didn't know that, but I go every year and I've never seen them cut the nets down. But then he kind of spun. He was like, honestly, I kind of like that Indiana's never won it because I want our guys to get rest. I want our guys to be ready to go.
That's what everybody says when they don't do it. Like,
yeah.
Hey,
so I like spun it. I was
thing.
Like,
that.
Yeah,
I thing. And I
it, and I said, if my team was playing in a conference tournament and I felt like they had an opportunity to go to the Final Four or go to the national championship, that I would be okay with them bowing out early in the conference tournament. But if I don't feel like my team's good enough to win a national title or make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, then go win it. Because it's cool. But at the same time, I do think that this Kansas State team is putting a lot of value on the Big 12 tournament. It's Jerome Tang's first season. This is a team that, quite frankly, doesn't have a lot of tournament experience at this time of the year. So I think getting as much of that on short prep and short rest is something this team probably needs to stack and at least get some experience with before going into the NCAA tournament, which you get a little bit more rest. You get a little bit more time to prepare for your next opponent because there's a day between, and you don't necessarily know your opponent's scouting report as well as you're going to in your conference tournament game. But I do think that you're seeing the value of what the loss against West Virginia is bringing for Kansas State now as you look at the matchups and the path that K-State has to take to get to the conference title.
I just don't think that TCU is that much harder than Oklahoma State or Oklahoma. I honestly don't.
I mean, in some ways,
But I don't really think
TCU,
this TCU team's that good.
In
But that
theory,
shows you how little I think of the two Oklahoma schools.
In theory, TCU, I think, should be worse than Oklahoma State. Like, Oklahoma State, to me, has guys, like, on the higher end of their game that would scare me more than TCU. And, like, how seriously should you have to take a team that shot 29% from three over the course of an entire season? Like, that's the thing. If you just plug up the inside, like, unless it's, that once in a blue moon moment and TCU's just draining threes,
which they've done twice this year.
Yeah, against Oklahoma State when they somehow scored 100 points, which
each opponent when they've done that.
I found it real quick. K-State's 4-1 all time in the Big 12 tournament against TCU. The only loss was actually the first time they played. That was the 2015 season. K-State lost by 2 in the play-in round. That's when Bruce Weber and everything was kind of on a little bit of a downturn. But since then, K-State has picked up wins over TCU in the Big 12 tournament in 2018. They beat them in overtime. Then they lost to KU in the next round. That was the first Big 12 tournament without Dean Wade. And then 2019, they beat TCU in the first round, lost a tight one to Iowa State. The next year, they beat TCU, and then the Big 12 tournament got canceled because of COVID. And then the following year, they beat TCU by 21 in the 8-9 or in the 7-10 game or something. And then that was the last time they played. So K-State 4-1 all time in Kansas City against TCU. The argument about I don't really care if they lose in the conference tournament and all that. I think that's what some fan bases say to cope with not doing well in their conference tournament. And it's what people also on the outside, I'm not putting this on KU fans because I truly think KU fans hey, if we win it, awesome. But if we lose, whatever, we got, a whole other tournament that we're focused on. But I think people on the outside, whenever KU loses a conference tournament, they didn't want to be there. They wanted to rest up for the tournament, But when they win it, it's they were motivated and whatever. We've seen teams win their conference tournament and then turn around and win the NCAA tournament. I mean, Kansas did it last year.
We didn't see it for a really long time, though.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the last team before that was UConn in 2011. Mm-hmm. So I get it. But I just think that's kind of the randomness of the game. That just, you're playing teams that know everybody very well and in the conference tournament, so you might get bounced, but then you're good enough to beat teams that aren't familiar with you. I don't put a ton of stock into it, and I like what you said also about if you're not a team that ultimately can win a national title, K-State's a team that can get to the Final Four, but do we really see them winning a sixth game and beating one of the top 5 teams for a national championship? That's a little bit harder to see. So I get what you're saying there, and that makes sense. Unless you're Gabe, who does think K-State can do that. I mean, it's possible, but the percentage chance of it seems small.
I'm just saying I think that opinion holds more value when you're a fan of a team in the Big Ten or the SEC, or I guess the American too, because your conference title game is played on Sunday, not Saturday. So you inherently get one less day of rest. And I remember this from my time covering Illinois the year they won it in 2021. They found out their NCAA tournament bid, matchup, region, all that stuff, as I would assume it was on the ladder cutting down the Big Ten tournament net. So there's no time to mentally re-engage or reset before going to prepare for the NCAA tournament. And I think that is something that's kind of valuable. And if you win the Big 12 title on a Saturday, you still get to go back to your own college campus and still get to gather with your team and watch the selection show on Sunday. And I think that those are all valuable moments and valuable mentally, and just to be able to recharge that if you're in the Big Ten or the SEC, or I guess the American too, because they play theirs on Sunday, you don't get that moment to just kind of recharge and refocus on what the actual task at hand is. And I think that really holds the most true in the Big Ten, because that game ends and it goes straight into the selection show. So I think that can be tough. But what were you saying, Gabe?
Well, I was going to say Villanova won their conference tournament in 2018 and won the national title in a rout.
It's true.
Pretty much the whole way through the tournament. And so and then KU did it last year. UConn did it in 2011. I think Louisville might have done it in 2013. Maybe that's wrong.
Here's what's interesting about this. Real quick,
that season didn't happen, Gabe.
Alec bringing up the whole Saturday Sunday thing. Think about all those teams that did it then, UConn, Villanova, KU, maybe Louisville did it. All those leagues, they play their championship games on Saturday afternoon, evening. Like we
So
haven't seen this.
So are you saying that that's the reason the Big Ten hasn't won a national title since 2000?
They're handicapping themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Move that thing up. Well, that's why somebody should have won it for the Big Ten the year they played it a week earlier, just so they could play in the Garden. You know, that was your chance, Big Ten, and you missed it. So
it's true.
Exactly. But my point remains, like, and this was the thing that I was going to go back to, and I went through the national championship criteria of like things that teams have to do to win a national title, and one of the things was every national champion ever, or at least in the data that I had compiled, so since 1987, which is when the 3-point line came in, and I think is most applicable criteria point or data point. Every national champion has either won their conference in the regular season, had a first or second team All-American, or won their conference tournament championship. So like you have to show that you can have like.
How long did it take you to research that?
A while, but I did this a couple years ago. So it's just something that I go back to and like I've bookmarked it as a tab. Every national champion has finished.
So you just like go through and update this every year now?
It's a study.
I should, but like as far as I know, that nothing. Baylor won their league. Kansas won their league last year. Kansas had a first team All-American last year. They won the conference tournament championship last year. Like if you win your regular season crown, win your tournament crown, and win your first or second team, you have a first or second team All-American, like you're in pretty good shape. And my point is, K-State has two guys who, whether it's consensus or not, are going to be on different All-American teams. So they don't necessarily need to win this conference tournament. I think it would be a great sign for K-State in terms of the level of basketball that they're playing. And that's why I don't buy into the like rest is more valuable than playing the games and winning, because I think that proving to yourself that in a short amount of time you can beat multiple quality opponents is an extremely valuable thing. So I think that there's certainly more weight to be put on K-State proving to themselves that they can beat 3 straight teams that are 3 really good teams in 3 straight days, rather than like, I mean, we probably don't need to see Kansas do that. We probably don't need to. Baylor might think that they don't need to do that. They don't need to do that. And I still think they probably do.
They probably do.
They don't have those guys from the national title team. But
they do. Adam Flagler was on that team.
My overall
point guy,
is just
John
like,
was on that team.
Believe in this K-State team, because when I asked Jerome Tang, like, what makes you think that this team can have March success? You've been around a team that had March success a couple of years ago. It's not like he's forgotten about it. The first thing he did is he just brought up Marquise and Keontae, and he was like, we've got 2 dudes who I think are going to be the best guys on the court every time that we play. And it sounds simple and it sounds like, well, duh, but like it should be well, duh. That's kind of what March is about sometimes.
It's true. I did the research right here, aka I found a link on the NCAA's website. Here are the last however many teams to win their conference tournament and win the NCAA tournament. So KU last year did it. That was a Saturday finish. 2018 Villanova, Saturday finish, winning the Big East. 2013 Louisville, Saturday finish, winning the Big East.
That season didn't happen.
2011 UConn won the Big East. The last time that it happened, 2010 Duke won the ACC tournament, and the ACC was playing their championship on a Sunday still then. So that happened, and then KU broke it up in 2008. They won the Big 12 and then the tournament. But Florida won the SEC in back-to-back years in 2006 and 2007, and they won back-to-back national titles. So the rest and whatever thing, it's a weird trend that we're on, but it doesn't mean anything because there's enough evidence to back it up. Like if you go back further, you get into a pretty loaded stretch here where teams were winning their conference tournaments and winning the national championship, like Duke, Michigan State, UConn, Kentucky, all did it in like the 90s and early 2000s to get there. So it's just one of those things. In fact, as I look at it, I think every single year, except for 2014 that UConn won a national title, they won their conference tournament. So it's just one of those weird things that sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And it's going to be spouted by everybody. Like if K-State wins the conference tournament the argument for them is, oh, they've got all this momentum. They just beat 3 really good teams in 3 straight days. Like, that's how
That's what
prepared they
happened
are
with
for the
Iowa
tournament.
last year.
Yeah. And the second that they lose, it's going to be like, hey, that's all right. That's what somebody's going to say. That's what I wanted. Like, I wanted them, get out of there healthy, rest up, be ready for the tournament. That's what really matters. And like every single team that shows up in Kansas City, outside of probably Oklahoma State, who absolutely needs to win games, is probably going to say that. Like, KU is going to have people say that. Texas is going to have people say that. Whoever else you want to throw out there, they're all going to feel that way. So it doesn't ultimately really matter. Couple of other things on K-State TCU for Thursday. I mean, we've seen how these teams have played each other this year. Who, in addition to Noel and Johnson, is going to have to play a bigger, more expanded role in this game? Because we've talked about with the way some of the matchups have played out this season, this is actually a game, and I know that we just talked about Tyke Green played the most minutes of the season on Saturday against West Virginia, and that's probably not a winning recipe. But like, this is one of those games where we might see more of Tyke Green, because K-State is going to need somebody that can go and get a rebound and be a little bit more physical. So is there anybody outside of Noel and Johnson that you think is going to be a big-time role player in this game that we otherwise wouldn't normally talk about?
I think the answer has to be Desi Sills.
Okay.
Because he didn't start in either of the 2 games.
True.
If you're counting him as a role player.
It's true.
Is that a fair answer?
Everybody's a role player that's not Marquise Noel and Keontae.
Yeah, that's my opinion on this team too.
Yeah.
By the way, I just never like said that, because I think the definition of a role player is very like one person has one definition, the other person has another definition of a role player. Like, everyone, I think, kind of plays their own role, unless you do everything, which Marquise and obviously Keontae Johnson both do. But yeah, I think it's Desi Sills. When you kind of saw, I mean, he didn't start either of the 2 games against TCU this season, and obviously K-State beat TCU in early February in Manhattan. But like, again, like, it's hard to put a lot of stock to that game because TCU didn't have their best player, and their second best player, maybe not their second best player, their pretty important big man only played like 18 minutes because he was still coming back from his is Achilles. Is that what we decided what it was? Like an Achilles strain or calf strain or something? I don't really know. Some sort of lower leg
down there.
Yeah, some sort of lower leg injury. Only played like 18 minutes because of he wasn't there conditioning wise. So I think Desi Sills needs to play pretty well, but I also think that K-State needs to play well on the inside, because obviously when you kind of look at what Eddie Lampkin has been able to do since returning and being healthy, that's something that maybe is a little bit concerning for Kansas State, I guess you could maybe say, if you kind of want to dive into some of the numbers, especially because we know that this is a team that doesn't have the most physical bigs on the inside, or this is a team that doesn't have a lot of guys on the inside who like banging bodies, who like, getting physical and everything else. So I think they might need somebody to step in on the inside and be willing to put a few fouls on Eddie Lampkin.
Well, Naquan Tomlin will volunteer his services to give some fouls because he loves him some foul trouble. I mean, Tomlin is a guy that, with the way that like TCU has some of the body types, that you feel like Tomlin would be kind of a weapon to be able to use defensively against TCU. But if he's going to get into foul trouble, that kind of negates anything. But I would imagine we probably see
I guess
more
Lampkin
Tyke
didn't
Green
play against Oklahoma.
Keeping him healthy for the tournament that matters. That's what they want.
Yeah, I'm looking at his game logs right now. He didn't play against Oklahoma. So he hasn't played in 2 of TCU's last 3 games.
That's why I just don't think that he's going to be a super impactful guy. And I think that, I mean, maybe he does, but I ultimately keep going back to, and I'm looking at the box scores for both matchups. And the key to me for K-State is when they played in Manhattan, they got 9 rebounds from Tyke Green. They got 6 from Desi Sills. That was on a night where Gasson and Naquan combined for 7 rebounds. Okay. So if you're not getting a ton of rebounds out of your bigs, your guards have to rebound really well. And it's especially crucial against a TCU team that doesn't shoot the ball well. So they rely on offensive rebounding to score effectively. They only had 6 offensive rebounds in Manhattan. Well, they had 14 when they played in Fort Worth. So I think the key number for me is keep the offensive rebounds for TCU below 10. And I would almost guarantee that K-State wins the game if TCU does not get 10 offensive rebounds. And like, if I'm Jerome Tang, that's probably the number I'm pointing to the most, because it's the most controllable. Like, whether TCU makes threes or not above their 29% season clip is probably not something you can truly control, because ultimately defense is about giving up or limiting good looks. But once the look is up, you have no control whether it goes in or not.
Yeah.
So if those are going in, the best thing that you can do is make sure that you are boxing out so that when they don't go in, they're not getting putbacks and layups, because Baugh, Miller, all those guys are super athletic. And when you just let them get tip-ins and ones off of offensive rebound opportunities, and then you get into foul trouble, like, that's how K-State, that would be the recipe for disaster. So I would just point to, whether it's Naquan, whether it's Gassan, whether it's Keontae, like, we've seen different guys lead K-State in rebounding all year long. So trying to pin who's going to lead the team in rebounding on Thursday night or tomorrow night is not a great, like, I've got no idea who's going to do it, but somebody's got to be that guy that steps up and attacks the glass and goes and rebounds.
You know, the more I look at it and think, so if you want to equate it like this, basically, TCU got essentially 34 extra possessions in the game against K-State with their 14 offensive rebounds and 20 turnovers that K-State had in the first meeting that they played against each other. And that, like, the turnovers thing is the biggest thing if you go and look, because, like, comparatively, like, TCU didn't get as many offensive rebounds in the game in Manhattan. But K-State only, like, turned it over 5 less times against TCU. K-State, I think, was better in their transition defense. And also, I think we realized as the season went on, outside of maybe Saturday in West Virginia for Marquise Noel, the live ball turnovers were cut down. Like, of the turnovers, they weren't necessarily like, no, I'm just going to give the ball to you at half court and you can race down for a dunk. Like, there was a lot of transition buckets for TCU. And so as I sit here and think about it, even though, like, what we've seen this season, TCU could be concerning for K-State, as we talk about it more and I look at it, I feel a little bit better about K-State, because both times they've defended TCU really well. Like, we know TCU is a terrible team offensively, but they've shot under 18% from three in both of the games. They have shot like under 65% from the free throw line, and they've been right around 44% from the field. And K-State has turned the ball over 15 and 20 times in those games. Like, I think K-State can defend TCU pretty well. And really, this is just going to come down to, as long as K-State doesn't give away bad turnover after bad turnover, like, this game could, to me, has a likelihood of playing out more similar to what it did in Manhattan, where K-State pulls away, than the outcome in Fort Worth, where TCU is kind of at arm's length. And I would lean more towards K-State has a better chance of winning this thing by double digits than us maybe seeing like a really tight game in the final couple of minutes. Like, maybe this is a better matchup for K-State than we think. And just because we've seen the two games earlier in the season and how they played out, we're a little bit iffy because we don't know what to expect. But K-State's defense has actually been pretty solid in both of the games. It's just been a matter of their offense turning the offense for TCU as opposed to offense for K-State in that first meeting. So maybe I'm trying to talk myself into feeling a little bit better about how this thing goes for K-State, but I really do think that it's a possibility that this is, I mean, it's not an easy matchup, but it's likely more easy than what we are anticipating it being, just because we really don't have much of anything to go off of with the anomalies that were the two games they played against each other this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of look at it, and the two games that K-State has played against the two biggest, I guess not the two biggest, the two games that K-State's played against Texas and the two games that K-State's played against TCU are just really hard to judge because for obvious reasons. So I think that's what makes K-State's side of the bracket and their path to potentially playing on Saturday so interesting and so mysterious about what you're going to expect and what you're going to be able to predict. Like, I think the one constant we can expect if K-State's able to beat TCU is that the arena is going to be pretty K-State heavy come Friday night when they play Texas. Like, that's the only thing I would count on going into that game, because I don't know how much else I can really count on other than Keontae Johnson probably playing well, Marcus Carr scoring in double figures. Like, I don't really know what else I can count on.
I can put a little bit more
throwing some
stock.
great pump fakes.
Okay, I knew it was coming. I can put a little bit more stock into like the K-State and Texas games because they were both close. Like they were both, in the same realm of everything. So I can understand. Like I know that first game was weird. Like neither team is going to score like that again this year. But they were close games, and K-State was in them. They won the game in Austin, and they found a way to, have the lead with a minute left in Manhattan. Like, I get what you're saying, and that's why I want to see that matchup again.
Yeah,
like K-State, Texas could be the best game of this tournament if they get to play again. I mean, barring K-State, KU in the championship, which I think everybody would be excited for. But like that's the most entertaining matchup that can come out of it because both games have been phenomenal this season. They've been played in totally different ways, and both sides probably look at the game at their own place and say that outcome should have been different. Like Texas probably says,
it's the only game they lost at the Moody Center.
What do we do wrong here? How did we give up 116? Like we should have won that game. And K-State conversely is saying the same thing about how did we not beat Texas? Like we were up double digits at halftime. We had the lead with a minute left. And like, that's a great point. The only home losses those two teams had this year were to each other. So it's going to be fascinating. And I do hope that we get to see that matchup play out because that'd be really fun. So I'm looking forward to what we get out of it.
And I think that, and I wrote this in our tournament predictions piece, Texas, since the Big 12 tournament has gone to Kansas City, typically underwhelms. And I think that people need to remember that when inevitably Oklahoma State or Oklahoma is playing Texas on Thursday evening and K-State's fans are in the building, getting seated, getting ready for TCU, and it's a 4-point game with 8 minutes to play, and suddenly the entire arena is rooting for Texas to not play well. And when it becomes 3 fan bases against one that typically, like, let's be real, Texas basketball fans don't necessarily always travel super well to Kansas City of all the fan bases. Like that, a coach going through his first conference tournament at this level, like I know that Rodney Terry had some time at Fresno State and whatever, but he hasn't done this with these types of expectations. Like I think that, and I wrote that I thought Iowa State's going to beat Baylor, but it would not surprise me. In fact, I think it will be a very, very close game, regardless of whether they play Oklahoma State or whether they're playing Oklahoma, because Oklahoma State's either going to be in one of those spots where it's like, you know what, you beat Texas, you're probably in the field. And Oklahoma is going to be playing for they need to go on a crazy bid stealing run. So I think that game is going to be extremely tight. And I think that K-State fans are going to help root against Texas pretty strongly.
Well, there's going to be 9 fan bases there that are rooting against Texas. So
yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot.
Considering the circumstances, there's going to be 9 fan bases there, and all the neutrals who are just basketball fans are probably going to be rooting against Texas that are there. I think that's fair to say. I mean, even the people who, like, if Oklahoma were to beat Oklahoma State, like, people would be rooting for Oklahoma in that game because they're the higher seeded team, and upsets, that's just how it works in tournaments.
I don't know. In this circumstance, I'm not so sure because I think, like, there's a little bit of like people wanting to see Oklahoma State get into the tournament.
No, I was saying if Oklahoma beats Oak State and they're playing Texas.
Oh yeah. That's a very
that arena is going to be rooting.
Well, and again, I've tried to convey to you, people don't hate Oklahoma to like anywhere near the level of like Texas, because like Texas is the ringleader here. Like Texas is going, you get it. Like OU has to go, and OU also, again, like their level of status is very deserving of being grouped in with the Alabamas and Georgias of the world. Texas has done nothing of that sorts over the last, getting close to 15 years now. So that's where, Texas being coattail riders, but still want to be the guys that puff their chests out. That's where people get against it. Like there's just a sense of entitlement that isn't necessarily deserved with Texas athletics over the last few years. Let's dive into it real quick. We did our predictions for the Big 12 tournament that are up on the site right now. Alec didn't like some of the questions on there because he thought they were tough. He didn't want to make any predictions. Look, I said about it, like, it's March. The biggest thing with March is making wrong predictions. So I'm just getting us kind of ready to go. I did pick Texas as my top 4 seed that loses the earliest, because I do think kind of what Gabe said, like OU or OSU, both will have high levels of motivation for that game, especially Oklahoma State. Like, they played some weird ones against Texas this year, and I think they feel like they can give them a little bit of a better shot. They'll be desperate. And I think that Oklahoma State team right now is probably pretty similar to the K-State team that showed up there in 2017. The only difference being that K-State team was probably in a little bit of a better spot, but they got there. They played in the 3-6 game against Baylor on Thursday night, and they got a big win against Baylor, and that felt like, okay, you can breathe easier, like you're probably in. If Oklahoma State were able to get there, take care of Oklahoma tonight, and then beat Texas, they probably feel like they're in. So of the top 4 seeds that I think lose the earliest, I think it's going to be Texas. My only issue with seeing Iowa State beat Baylor is I just can't believe that Iowa State, like this Iowa State team, would be able to beat Baylor for a second time in 5 days, but maybe they can.
I said that Baylor or Kansas State, but mostly because of the matchups. Like, I just don't think the 2 Oklahoma teams are very good. So I do think Texas is going to beat both of them, and KU is probably going to beat whoever they end up playing because they're Kansas. So I said Baylor or KU, or Baylor or K-State, excuse me, but that's mostly just because of the matchups that they have. But I struggle to see Iowa State beat Baylor back to back, like you said, Mason. But then again, like, I don't know how much I really trust Baylor at this point, because their defense is terrible. And if they make shots, they're awesome, like Gabe wrote. But if they don't make shots, like, they're very beatable.
It's true.
Teams that don't get stops defensively, who don't have crazy good crowd support, which Baylor's not going to have, they just scare me, especially when you're playing Iowa State. Like, Iowa State, I just think they're going to shoot more like they would at home than they would on the road in this type of setting. So whether that's right or not, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem that crazy to me. I also think that, like, if we're ranking in the quarterfinal matchups, regardless of what happens in West Virginia Tech, regardless of what happens in Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, the 2 teams I feel most comfortable advancing in their games are KU and K-State. Like, honestly, that's just the way I feel. I think that K-State matches up really well with TCU based on the fact that perimeter defense is their strong suit. Perimeter shooting is not TCU's strong suit. I think that KU matches up well with West Virginia because I think Bob Huggins will probably just quit on his team. And like, we've seen that's the way that typically goes. Texas Tech won't have Mark Adams. Like, neither of those looks good. So if we're ranking like 1 through 4, and this was not one of the questions that Alec had an issue with, or it wasn't one of the questions we were asked, but if we're asked to rank 1 through 4 confidence level on winning, I'd go Kansas, Kansas State, and then I would probably go Texas and then Baylor. If we're going top 4 seeds in the quarterfinals, who we think are most confident that they're winning.
I don't disagree with that.
I do think I'd go KU, Texas, and then I would flip a coin for 3 and 4.
See,
Alec's worried about K-State tomorrow.
I am worried about K-State tomorrow.
I'm not saying, like, I'm not, and I don't think Gabe's saying this either. Like, K-State's not a lock to win tomorrow, but K-State has a lot more going for them in that building than what Texas does. Like, Texas gets 0 support in Kansas City. Like I've told you, the only Texas fans that are going to be there, it's going to be a group of 25 men in like their mid 60s that walk around in their burnt orange, like button up shirts and everything. And they sit there and the band plays and then Texas loses and they go home. Like, that's kind of what Texas does there outside of the COVID year. So I like Texas should be concerned because if you get Oklahoma State, like Oklahoma State can muck up a game. They have guys that at any given moment can kind of go off. I picked Bryce Thompson as like a dark horse guy to be on the All Big 12 tournament team because these teams always have one random guy that just pops off and you have to play a couple games to get there. like Bryce Thompson could go for 25 at any given moment. More likely than not, he's only going to go for like 6 on like 3 of 17 shooting, but he could go for 25. So, and Oklahoma State needs it. They are the one team showing up to this tournament that knows they absolutely have to win probably 2 games at least to get into the field. Everybody else, like Tech, you probably have to win the tournament. Oklahoma, you have to win the tournament. So that's why, to me, it comes across as Oklahoma State absolutely needs this game. Texas should be worried. K-State, you shouldn't write off TCU. KU shouldn't write off West Virginia. But they should have enough to get over the hump there and be able to put away their quarterfinal games.
I agree. I mean,
I don't know. Maybe it's just hard for me to gauge like the whole impact that the crowd has on the Big 12 tournament because I've never been. But that's just my like view of it. But like I've been to the Big 10 tournament. Like it was in Indianapolis last year for the Big 10, and Illinois and Indiana were playing, and like you wouldn't have known who the home team was.
See, you're not going to have that problem with K-State, TCU, Oklahoma State, Texas. You might wonder who is the home team, but that's just because nobody is like cheering for them. Like I don't know. So honestly though, like everybody that's there tomorrow night,
the first game of the day in the Big 10, and it wasn't like a packed arena. But if I remember correctly, like there was probably more Indiana fans there because it was in Indianapolis. But
the K-State fans will be cheering for Oklahoma State tomorrow night. Like Oklahoma State will have the K-State fans on their side there. There's no doubt about that. And then, I mean, because not only is that like, oh yeah, screw Texas, whatever. K-State gets to play Oklahoma State in the semifinals. We know Mike Boynton is not making adjustments. He's not worried about Marquise Noel or Keontae Johnson. He's just going to let them go for 25 each again. Like he's got no worries there.
That's why, like, one of my favorite games to play is the close your eyes and picture it happening game. And Oklahoma State playing in the Big 12 tournament championship game fails every test in that game. So if they get past Texas and K-State gets past TCU, like sleep well Thursday night, knowing that like
that's true.
That Saturday K-State will be
there. Buy your tickets now for Saturday. If K-State wins Thursday, buy your tickets for Saturday ahead of time. That way you can beat the stock surge that's coming when it's K-State KU after Thursday. Because like that, if those are the matchups Friday night, if we get like KU Baylor and then K-State Oklahoma State, like that first game is going to be incredible. That second one, Oklahoma State's going to battle. Like it's been close with K-State, but Oklahoma State hasn't done enough to like stop K-State, cut off the head of the snake and stop them from winning it. So we'll see how it ends up going. Other predictions that we had. So I had Texas as the first one out. Alec, again, just got to throw it out there so people are aware. He took K-State as the top 4 seed to lose the earliest because he's not confident in what he has seen this year between the two teams, which I understand. And then Gabe went with Baylor against Iowa State. So we're all kind of different there. The other interesting one that I threw out there was the bottom half team that lasts the longest. Gabe kind of hit on a couple in there, but we both mentioned West Virginia in this process. I know why I think West Virginia could do it. What are your thoughts on West Virginia getting out of the 7-10 game are they the 8-9, the 8-9 game and taking on KU?
I think West Virginia wins and then loses to KU.
But they can get by because they're great offensively. Like they're a top 15 offense. Eric Stevenson could just go like he could be a Kemba candidate for March. I mean, I know that West Virginia is probably getting
he'd be a real hated Kemba.
What?
Wait till America gets to know who Eric Stevenson is. They'll really hate him. They'll make a 30 for 30. I hate Eric Stevenson. That'll come out next week.
Hey, he's like a light version of Marshall Henderson.
Gabe and I were texting about this. Eric Stevenson is the guy who showers before every game, does his hair before every game, and gets his hair cut every week. Am I wrong?
So it's a problem to be well groomed, Alec?
No, it's just that's just who he is.
You hate personal hygiene?
It's just who he is. And like he's always got his arm around Huggins' shoulder, like, hey, do you want me to do this? You want me to do that? Like
It's a well-coached player.
No, listen, Eric Stevenson's very good, but wait till America gets to know who Eric Stevenson is. If West Virginia makes a run, America will not like Eric Stevenson.
I mean, America should already know who he is. He's played in the American. He's played in the Pac-12. He's played in the SEC. He's played in the Big 12. He's a well-traveled man.
Like, give him an extra year and let him go, screw around in the ACC or Big East next year. So everybody can get a taste of Eric Stevenson.
He can complete the Chuck Moore circuit of like 5 leagues in 6 years.
So real quick, a little sidebar here. I looked up Marshall Henderson's Wikipedia page. Do you guys have any? I guess I knew this because I had seen it earlier this year, but it reminded me. You guys have any knowledge of where Marshall Henderson is now? He is actually coaching college basketball as an assistant somewhere. His personality fits the reason why this school is notable very well.
I know this. I saw
it's
this.
It's not an NCAA Division I institution.
Oh, then I don't know.
Oh, isn't it East Mississippi Community College or something like that?
Close. It is the featured school in the latter seasons of Last Chance U. He is at Independence Community College in Kansas right now.
Wow.
As an assistant coach.
You might need to do some boots on the ground journalism and get out there.
Well, Mason's boys with Jason Brown, so we can probably get some connections.
Boys. I would say he was on the game one time, and it was quite the experience. I'm pretty sure we pre-recorded the interview because we didn't know what was going to come out of his mouth. I don't think the Pirates had a good year on the basketball court. I could be wrong.
Who does Jason Brown do that podcast with?
Zach Smith, the Ohio State
wide receivers coach. What a duo.
The Pirates went 10-22 this season, and they lost last night to Butler.
How do you think those two guys came together and were like, let's do a podcast?
We're both shitheads. That's what they said. And like, okay, that works. I was actually listening to Butler Indy on the radio last night. I just didn't realize Butler was playing independent. So there you go. Other fun fact real quick about Marshall Henderson's Wikipedia page. This is what it says in here about his senior year. Missed the first regular season game against Troy, made his return against Coastal Carolina, had 19 in the 72-70 win. He had a controversial altercation while playing against Penn State where he got into it with two fans who were heckling him. He scored 19 on the way to a 79-76 victory. He had one of his worst games against Kansas State in which he went 4 for 18 for 13 points. However, he immediately followed it up with one of his best against Oregon, scoring 39 points against the 13th ranked Ducks. And then he also missed the first 2 regular season games against SEC play against Mississippi State and Auburn. So what a career Marshall Henderson had. K-State, I think, in back-to-back years beat Mississippi in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Was able to take care of him. So fun times there talking about Marshall Henderson. But yes, Eric Stevenson has a little bit of that in him. Had it not been for everything that transpired last week, Caleb Grill also would have been a candidate for that. I mean, imagine if we got a Caleb Grill, Eric Stevenson Big 12 semifinal. If that had happened, there would have been a lot of people over the age of 65 that turned off their TVs and would not have been able to handle the amount of intensity and passion that those two were playing with. Those are kind ways of putting their styles of play. Other notes here. You guys have both hit on Iowa State being a team in the bottom half that could make the deepest run, and we've kind of gone
about that at all.
Well, that's the thing. There's just not anybody to be confident about.
Yeah, that's why I struggled to answer these questions. I was like, I don't know. I was like, who knows? I don't know who's going to win. I don't know who's going to lose.
All right, my favorite one. It kind of ties in. The quote: "They probably won't win, but I know ball and love this dark horse." End quote team. I told you guys the backstory from that. I think it was 2019. I was dead convinced that Oklahoma State was going to go on like a semifinal or Big 12 championship game run because I love Thomas DeZagua and Lindy Waters. And then I think they lost in the first round games on Wednesday night, and that completely screwed up my prediction that was supposed to run on Thursday. So who is that team for both of you guys? Like, obviously mine's West Virginia. Who is that team that, again, it's not saying that they will do this, but they would be your dark horse to where, like Gabe says, like if he can shut his eyes, he can see it happening on Saturday where they're there playing for the Big 12 title.
I said TCU, but I feel very little confidence in saying that. The part of the reason I said that, though, is because if TCU is going to get hot and TCU is going to be a team that makes a run in the NCAA tournament, it's going to start this weekend.
Well, better because they've only won 3 of their last 9.
So that's why I picked TCU. But I don't feel confident about picking TCU to do that.
Am I allowed to pick Kansas State?
You're allowed to pick whoever you want.
Well, because I wrote
West team that's a 3 seed.
Because
it's going to be a betting favorite in their first 2 games, probably.
No, they won't be. If they play Texas, they will not.
Yeah, that's true. They probably won't be a betting favorite against Texas. Because isn't K-State like plus like 2,200 or whatever?
No, they're plus 650 to win the Big 12 conference tournament, which is behind Baylor. That's dumb. It's behind Texas. That's dumb. And then it's behind Kansas. That makes sense.
So they're the 4th highest. Okay.
They've got the 4th highest odds. And like I wrote about West Virginia because I told you offensively, I could see Eric Stevenson going on a run and all that kind of stuff. But if we're going with the like, this team is not expected to win it, but I could absolutely see them winning it, it has to be K-State.
Well, if I can do that, then if I can do what the guy below me just said, then that's my answer.
Okay. All right. So Alec has gone from TCU to K-State. The 2 teams.
Well, I don't consider the 3 seed a dark horse.
What do you mean it's not a dark?
Depends on the circumstances.
I think you can make a legitimate argument that Kansas State is the 2nd best team in the Big 12. So I don't think you can say that team's a dark horse to win the league title when they're arguably the 2nd best team in the league.
I can make the argument because I've heard people say that there's 4 other teams that are more likely to go to the Final Four than them this year in this league. So of course I can make that argument.
I mean, if you're going to make the argument and I can take Kansas State, I'm going to take Kansas State if I'm allowed to take them as a dark horse. Maybe Judge Judy dressed up as Mason Voth over here can tell me they count as a dark horse.
We can give them medium horse status. Like they're in between, they're in the middle here of being a dark and a light horse candidate to win the Big 12 tournament. I think that's fair.
Like a gray horse.
Yeah,
a gray horse at the Kentucky Derby that no one ever bets on because really bet on because it looks different.
It's a good one. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover, Alec. That's kind of rude.
Come on, dude.
But yes,
so many people are watching those horses walk into the little stalls at the Kentucky Derby like, oh, that's a good looking horse.
Yeah.
I'm betting.
Everybody knows the way you do that. You just look at the little booklet you get and you see the name, where they're from, and if any of those speak to you, you put money on them and you see what happens, So like if I walked into a horse race and I open up my little booklet and horse number 9, its name is like I don't know, like Meet Me in Manhattan or something. I'm like, okay, like that's got my attention. And then it's like its home location. It was like born and bred in Haven, Kansas. I go, how do I not put money on this horse? Like K-State connection. I had family in Haven, like close to where I grew up. Like I got to do it. Like that's how you bet on a horse, everybody. But yeah, I think K-State's fine because
Bob Baffert's trained and given steroids too.
Like if you asked anybody right now, outside of us, because we know ball, as we've established on this podcast, we may just start calling it We Know Ball. If you asked anybody outside of us, like, are they saying that K-State is winning the Big 12? Like, I bet you could go around and ask 10 people, obviously not wearing purple shirts tomorrow, and ask who's winning this Big 12 tournament. And I doubt anybody says K-State. Maybe you get one random dude that does know ball.
Like 10 people say Kansas.
Well, there you go.
But like
if 10 people, if 10 out of 10 say that Kansas is going to win it, then basically everybody's a dark horse. Like
exactly. In a league,
wrong to say that 10 out of 10 people would say KU.
You probably get somebody say something crazy, but
this is not the ACC. This is not where it's like, Duke and like this is the good version of the ACC in this hypothetical. But we're talking and not
the ACC 12 years ago, not today.
Well, it's not the version of the league that I got told yesterday by Dave O'Brien and Corey Alexander has 10 teams that are absolutely just as good as the 10 in the Big 12. But like in this hypothetical, when you go to Greensboro and you say, who's the favorite to win the league or win this tournament? if somebody came to you and said, well, I think North Carolina's a dark horse. They're the 3 seed.
That is a dark horse, though.
No. This is in a hypothetical world in which the
okay.
ACC is a good league. If you said the 3 seed, people would be like, you're insane. They're a top 3 seed. But guess what? That's because Duke has won 13 conference championships in like the last 40 plus seasons in the regular season. So of course they're not always considered to be like the no-brainer, no doubt about it winner. And neither is North Carolina. They don't win all the conference titles all the time. But in this league, one team always wins the conference title, which by virtue of that means everybody else is a dark horse to have good success.
All right. Except for maybe Iowa State. Iowa State's like the king of this thing. So, maybe like
South.
A few years ago.
Play the Juicy Wiggle.
Let's hope
they will play it, I bet.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I don't know that TJ Otzelberger has any room to Juicy Wiggle with as tight as his shirt is.
God, I wish I had arms like TJ Otzelberger.
If you had arms like TJ Otzelberger, would you wear shirts like TJ Otzelberger?
Yeah, dude. You want to show my arms off?
Okay.
What do you mean?
I didn't know. I didn't know if you were going to be like, I figured you were going to go the humble route and be like, no, like I'm just going to wear like a normal fitting shirt.
Would you not? If you had arms like TJ Otzelberger, would you not show off your arms? Especially for me. Like I'm single.
That's true.
You're married. True. You got no reason to. So if your answer is like, no, I'm going to go baggy shirt.
Yeah, I'd have to be wearing a parka over there. Keep them covered up. Keep the ladies off.
So like me over here, like I'm a single 23-year-old bachelor living in Manhattan.
Hey, maybe in between the sessions tomorrow, we just have you go over to P&L across the street and have you hit up the ladies. And that's your work for the night. See if we can find Alec Love in Kansas City. Get you a nice Iowa State girl. Yeah, there you go. Finding Alec Love at the Big 12 tournament. We're gonna figure that out tomorrow. We're also gonna have to find some of the exotic Big 12 eats around the arena. I know Gabe has the lowdown on this because he did a story on it about where they can be found, and they're not in the same place. So tell us about the Big 12 eats, and then I want each of you to tell me the one that you're most likely to try.
Well, I wrote a story about it. At work at KCTV and was talking about I figured out because we talked about it on the podcast last week that they were doing this, and then I went and read the press release and I was like, wait, they're gonna make you like go on a marathon around T-Mobile Center trying to find these things. And then in the funniest development of them all, you figure out that literally every entree or the Baylor root beer or Dr. Pepper float that they're offering can be found on the first level. But you know what? If you want those Longhorn quesadillas, you got to hit the escalators and get upstairs because they are only on the upper deck.
Oh, this feels like the Big 12 did that intentionally.
Yeah, like, we've talked about. There's zero chance that is a coincidence. Zero chance.
Yeah, Yormark tried. Yeah, we thought that like it would be with officiating or something. In reality, it's Yormark throwing Texas's quesadillas up at the top level. I like it. I respect the move. So good to know. We'll have to check that out. So
okay, of the ones I'm most excited to try, I would actually be really intrigued by the K-State bacon wrapped corn dog, but I could go without the purple relish. I'm not a relish.
Purple relish does concern me.
I'm not a relish guy to begin with.
Me neither.
Gabe grew up near Chicago at one point, near-ish to Chicago, I guess at one point. So maybe he's a big relish guy. He can give us a review of that one. I'm also not loving the idea of the TCU loaded tots because I feel like those are going to be purple sour cream.
See, I think I can get down with that. Like that's just food coloring in the sour cream. I can do that. Like it's going to look unique, but it's actually I think going to be pretty standard and probably pretty good. The only concern I have is I did a food review at Target Field in Minneapolis a couple summers ago, and I did a tater tot creation there. And it was very underwhelming. So tater tots concern me because they can be a little bit underwhelming when you get exotic with them. But I may have to, I'll have to try that one. That one's on the go list, I think.
I do think I'm most excited to try Oklahoma's Stormin' from Norman Oklahoma taco or West Virginia's Mountaineer roll, which is sliced pepperoni and mozzarella cheese in a soft roll.
Okay. Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know how that connects to West Virginia at all, but it sounds good.
oh, those are big out there. Like that's truly like a West Virginia, like Eastern United States type of thing, like the pepperoni rolls. Like our boy Fran Fraschilla, whenever he goes out and does a West Virginia game, like he will always like post about them on Twitter. Like that's how I knew it was a West Virginia thing. So it does seem pretty.
Sound good to me. So does Texas's quesadilla, but I'm a big quesadilla guy.
Who isn't a quesadilla guy?
Quesadillas rock.
All right. Well, we're gonna have Alec make a trek up to the top of the T-Mobile Center, get a quesadilla,
vlog it, and put it on the YouTube channel.
Yes, there we go. We'll throw all of them up on the YouTube that get done. Alec has also been tasked with making a Big 12 tournament meme after every game that takes place on Thursday, since he was so proud of what he was showing off on Monday's podcast from other games this season.
We haven't seen a lot of these.
So we're looking forward to that. And real quick, I think my pick for what I'm most looking forward to trying at the Big 12 Eats Showdown, I really do think it is the TCU loaded tots. I think I'd get on with that. I'd go TCU, West Virginia, and I hate to do it, but like the Jayhawks mac and cheese does look good with what it has going, because I do like some like French fried onions in there. So that's
mac
good.
and cheese. Smoke. Mac and cheese always slaps.
The
best meme I've ever made to this day.
I don't think it will be, but
this is still the best one I've made, right, Gabe?
Okay, for those listening over audio.
Come on, man, that's so funny.
It's Kobe Johnson riding a Washington Husky. So unless you love like niche Pac-12 basketball, which no one in our audience does, then you won't think it's funny. I will just say for the record,
that's also Trey White, by the way. That's not Kobe Johnson.
Oh, my bad.
It's okay. It was small.
My Big 12 eats that I would prefer, I think the TCU loaded tots look great. I agree with Alec that the Oklahoma stuff looks good, but that Texas Tech burger looks awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's a good one. I just think because it's a burger, like it's pretty standard to me.
True,
but yeah, I could get down with that. So Tex, it's the Tex Masked Rider burger, a beef patty, cheddar, fried onion ring, sweet pickled jalapenos, and Red Raiders barbecue sauce. So we'll see there. I think I'll have to try the Wabash Cannon Dog just because. I may have to do something with the purple relish, though, because like I'm not a relish guy. And even though I said I could do the purple sour cream, I'm a little on edge about the purple relish. I'm going to have to do some digging there as to what they've done to create that. But I'll probably have to throw that into the mix at some point. So,
Baylor's is so boring.
No, but I think it's the best one in terms of like
I know I'm going to get
reasoning behind it and everything. Like they've got the sailgating before football games and then Dr. Pepper being from down there. So like that one makes the most sense to me. But you're right. It's very underwhelming. It's like they just immediately thought of that one and they said, this is going to be easy. Like the Baylor float. And then they were like, this is actually kind of tough to figure out for everybody else. So
they should have added some like Baylor green food coloring and then everybody would lose their minds.
Yeah, that's true. This is a great
Make it mint chip ice cream or something.
Ugh.
Mint ice cream and Dr. Pepper.
You said green. That sounds terrible to me too, but like you said green ice cream. There you go.
We'll see. We'll get those fired up.
Sound an ugh to mint chip ice cream or an ugh to mint chip ice cream and Dr. Pepper, Mason?
Both. Mint chip ice cream in general, and then in Dr. Pepper, like that's
mint chip ice cream is awesome.
I will say I have a little bit of concern about the logistics of this whole situation as well, because there's only one stand for Texas Tech, KU, K-State, Oklahoma State, OU, TCU, and Iowa State, and Baylor. West Virginia and Texas are the only two schools that got multiple stands. So unless this is a false advertisement,
probably because they're the easiest to make, I would imagine. Like the West Virginia one, very low brow. The Baylor one,
that's my point.
To be stocked with ice cream. Yeah,
I'm just worried that we're going to run out of food,
or lines are going to be massive. I don't know. I think the plan is get there tomorrow, settle in, and then immediately get on the road to trying to find some of these so I can knock some of them out before we actually have to work. We'll see how it goes. Any other thoughts before we get out of here and we don't talk again until after K-State has played TCU in the Big 12 tournament? All right, good stuff. That'll do it for us. We'll be in Kansas City for however long the Wildcats are there. And tomorrow night, 8:30 is a scheduled tip time, last game of the day. I think personally, that's how I would prefer it play out. You either want to be the first game of the day or the last game of the day. And certainly for us, we just, 3 games, sit there, take it in, and then the work begins with the last game of the day. So I'm looking forward to it. A lot of good basketball this week. The Big 12 going to be playing a lot of it. And you can watch the Cats tomorrow night, 8:30 on ESPN2 if you're not going to be in Kansas City. So that'll do it for us. We're out, and we'll have something up, I'm sure, Friday while we sit around and wait for games to get underway if K-State does indeed win on Thursday. If not, then you'll actually hear from our voices again later this weekend, and by that time we'll know what's gone on with the NCAA tournament selections and everything else. So that'll do it for us. Be sure to go get signed up over at EMAW Online. If you use promo code EMAW30 right now, you get your first 30 days free of EMAW Online, and then be sure to subscribe to the YouTube and podcast feeds as well.